Hello, lovely humans and lovely dogs, if you're listening as well. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite dog training podcast with your favorite dog behavior nerd. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you've had a fabulous week this week and you are looking forward to another juicy episode of the Walk and Talk, because this week we're exploring something that affects the brain and the behavior of every single dog. And I don't think gets discussed anywhere near enough, especially when it comes to things like puppy fear periods or nervous rescue dogs or reactive dogs or adolescent dogs. Look, I could keep going forever, but you get the point. And it's something that I see misunderstood all the time. So what is it that's at the root of so many of the struggles people face with their dogs, whether that is they are pulling wildly at the end of the lead, or they are barking and lunging at other dogs, ignoring basic obedience cues that they know when they go out into the world, or just completely zoning out from you when the environment gets totally overwhelming? Well, today I am talking about cortisol, the stress hormone, and more specifically, exactly how stress hijacks your dog's brain, literally blocks their ability to learn, damages the connection between the two of you, and thankfully, what the heck you can do about it. So, if you have ever said, "Oh my God, he knows this at home," when you're asking your dog to do something at the park and he's just totally blanking you, or "Oh, he just goes totally deaf when another dog walks past," then trust me, this episode was made for you. So, let's start walking. Okay, so I always think it's really valuable to start with the science, because I am a big fan of not just chatting fluffy filler nonsense at you, but at the same time, I'm not a fan of overcomplicated jargon for the sake of making something sound more inaccessible than it is. So don't worry, I want to fully break this down. So, first up, cortisol is a hormone. It's part of your dog's stress response system, which is essentially designed to keep them alive in life or death situations. So, when your dog encounters something stressful, like a sudden loud noise, or a barking dog appears, or a fast approaching jogger just comes around the corner and takes you by surprise, and remember, what is determined to be a stressful trigger to your dog, first of all, varies between dogs. And for some, for example, an approaching jogger ticks the box totally. For others, it doesn't register at all. And second of all, it might make no sense to you whatsoever. For example, I once worked with a cockapoo who was absolutely terrified of snowmen. So there you go. You can't predict it. But what happens when they face that stressful trigger is their body will physically kick into gear and cortisol will flood their system. Their heart rate will increase, their muscles will start to tense, and you will literally be able to see this happening if you just pay attention and look at their posture, and see how it stiffens. You'll literally know when this is happening. And blood flow as well is redirected away from things like digestion, from brain systems to do with learning, and towards all systems that are simply critical to survival mode, which is obviously spot on if your dog is being chased by a lion. It's less brilliant when you're trying to get them to respond to a recall cue in the park, because cortisol is basically like the body's alarm bell. And once it rings, once it's released, your dog's brain shifts from learning to surviving, which is to say, there is only action. There is only doing. There is no thinking or considering. So while your dog is in that state, they physiologically cannot learn properly because their brain deprioritizes cognition. It literally shuts down the parts of the brain responsible for reasoning and impulse control, and it shifts into reflex and instinct. So when your dog goes into that, oh, he's just gone mode. And I'm sure 90% of you will know exactly what I'm talking about, particularly if you have a reactive dog. You know, that moment when their responsiveness just switches off and it's like they cannot hear you. It's because cognitively, he basically has kind of left the building because his brain has said, forget everything else, just stay alive. So it's really important up front that you take that on board and forget about the idea that he's just being stubborn or he's ignoring you on purpose or whatever else. It's basically not a choice. His brain has literally switched operating systems, and you're trying to dial in to an unmanned telephone line at this point, right? So, how do you know when this has happened? How do you know that cortisol has taken over? So, here are some red flags to look for. Okay, number one, any kind of sudden inability to focus, even on really simple things that you know they know. This could look like completely failing to respond to their name, as an example, or seemingly not even being able to see a piece of food being wafted under their nose. Second red flag. Okay, it's an obvious one, but barking, lunging, whining, these are all signs that your dog is in a stress state. Number three, pulling like a train all of a sudden, and not necessarily towards or away from any kind of particular thing in the environment. If your dog usually walks well and they're just suddenly pulling like crazy, this again can be a sign that they've entered a stress state. Number four, excessive sniffing or even just freezing. Number five, hypervigilance, which just looks like a constant scanning of the horizon or the environment. Your dog is looking for threats. Number six, trembling or shaking, excessive panting, a tucked tail. And number seven, which I kind of mentioned already, but a flat refusal of food, even really high value treats, and even things that ordinarily they would trade you in for in a heartbeat. These are all your red flags that suggest that cortisol is in action. And this is important, right? Cortisol takes time to leave the body. It's not just like a quick in out job. Studies have shown that it can actually take up to 72 hours for cortisol to return to baseline levels after a stressful event. So that's not moments. That's not like, oh, something stressful happened on your walk, let him come home and have a nap and he's good to go. That's literally days, which means if your dog has had a scary run in with another dog on, let's say, Monday, and then seems a bit off into the week, you get to Wednesday and they're still a bit odd, you're not imagining it. This stuff literally sticks around. So let's talk about what this means for our training. When cortisol is high, learning is almost impossible. And like I said, it's not because your dog is stubborn or defiant or they are choosing to ignore you. It's because the prefrontal cortex, the bit of the brain that makes thoughtful, considered decisions, that part of the brain is just offline. So when people say, oh, but he does this perfectly when we practice in the garden, that's because in the garden, his stress is low. His brain is open to learning and the reinforcement history is strong. Outside, conversely, when a trigger appears, a jogger, another dog, traffic, whatever, the stress system simply flips the switch and suddenly the cues vanish. The connection is lost and it feels like you're back to square one. But what I want you to know is that you are not back to square one at all. And your training isn't failing, because it's important that you remember this. Your dog absolutely has not forgotten. They just simply can't access the information in that moment. Now, here's where things get a little bit emotional, because when your dog is regularly experiencing stress, it actually erodes your connection, not because your relationship is bad at all, but because cortisol physically interferes with bonding hormones like oxytocin, which I think I talked about in a lot more detail earlier on in episode 9, which I think is called Wired for Each Other or something along those lines. That's a lovely feel good episode. So do go and give it a listen if you haven't already. Or save it for a day when your dog has really pissed you off and then go and listen to episode 9 and it will get you straight back on track together. So anyway, to get back to cortisol here, your dog's brain can't feel safe and stressed at the same time. And connection, that sweet, like lovely feel good vibe of, oh, we're in this together, that actually relies on a feeling of safety, which makes sense if you think about it. Just not a lot of people do. So if your dog is in a state of stress, if your dog does not feel safe, the connection between you and your dog will never reach its full potential. So ultimately, the more we can reduce stress and build trust, the deeper our bond becomes. And that's not just me being fluffy. It's just literally how the brain works. A solid connection isn't actually about, dominance or alpha structure or control. It's right there in the neurobiology. And if anyone claims to be an expert in the behavior of any species, or better yet, how two species can optimize their coexistence, which is just a fancy way of me saying here, how owners can best approach living life alongside their dogs, right? If anyone claims to be an expert in that and then tells you to hit, choke, or shock your dog or whatever else, then they're a very basic non-expert, because we can't assert connection. We can only set it up by helping our dog feel safe. And a punishment aside for a minute, this is also why the old school just push on through it method often backfires, because if your dog is already in a stress state and then you go and you add more pressure, you're not desensitizing them, you're actually flooding them. And flooding is a term you may have probably heard before, or maybe not, I don't know. If not, it essentially means when a dog is exposed to too much, too fast, with no way to escape. So if we had a dog who was, say, terrified of children, for example, to flood that dog, and there are trainers who, like, this is their MO for dealing with stressed dogs. So if we take this dog that's terrified of children, to flood that dog would be to, and what I'm about to say is wild on so many levels, by the way, but I'm literally just making it up. I'm just trying to demonstrate what this term means. It would be to shut that dog in a confined playground full of noisy children running around with no means of ending the experience or escaping from it. Doing this raises cortisol, obviously, and what it actually does to the dog is it triggers learned helplessness, and it's ultimately incredibly likely to increase future reactivity or leave us with a dog who simply shuts down in triggering scenarios in the future, which on the surface looks like a problem solved, perhaps, but it isn't a problem solved at all. It's essentially just a problem quietly corked up into a bottle. And the most dangerous thing about it is we have no idea how long for. And that's not resilience at all. Resilience is built through carefully managed, positive experiences in which your dog feels safe and successful. And there is absolutely a strategic and structured way to do this. If you have a reactive dog, go to my website. You can download a full day-by-day training program that will literally guide you through it. It is science-backed. It has helped hundreds of people achieve incredible success. And remember, the code podcast10 gets you 10% off. Or you can weave some of the following tidbits I'm about to share in this episode into your daily routine to just begin to explore how you can reduce your dog's cortisol. So my first practical tip for nervy, reactive, or chronically stressed dogs is simply to create a feeling of safety through structure, because predictability reduces stress. So have consistent routines, clear cues, and gentle transitions throughout your dog's day, and don't spring surprises on your dog if you can avoid it. My second tip for any dog owners who are fully aware of what their dog's cortisol triggers are is lower the threshold for your dog. So if your dog struggles near other dogs, let's say, don't start your work 5 feet away from other dogs. Start 50 feet away or 100 feet away or whatever it is. Distance is your friend. Work below threshold where the brain is still open to learning. And this is the Goldilocks zone where you make progress. Tip number 3 is use decompression walks. I think I talked about this in last week's episode, but let them sniff. Go slowly. Choose super quiet environments. Doing this allows your dog's nervous system to reset. It lowers their cortisol and it fills the brain with feel good neurotransmitters. Tip number 4 is one that so many people don't do because they don't want to risk waking the beast, as it were. And it is to actively reinforce calm states. So don't just train your obedience, but train your calm. Catch your dog in a soft, relaxed state and feed that. So if he's chilling on his bed, just stroll past and quietly drop a handful of kibble. Make that chilled out choice a good choice because so often, right, we give our dogs attention for all of the wild, crazy behaviors that we absolutely don't want. And then when they're doing the thing that we want them to do, when they're just laying on their bed snoozing, or when they're just quietly laying at your feet, like not hassling you, not barking at the window, whatever, we just totally ignore them and we don't make it rewarding at all. So try to stop and notice the calmness and build a reinforcement history around it. Tip number 5 is play some stress reducing games. So use games that create structure and fun, like patterning games, orientation games, or even just do some basic trick training. There's loads of free demos on my TikTok at Listen Dog Training or on my website, listendogtraining.com. I've got a whole design your own dog training pack that is literally filled with all the different training games, and each one explains what the benefits of that particular game or exercise are, as well as the step-by-step instructions on how to play it. So you can pick all the ones that would be beneficial to your dog and build your own perfect routine with them. Because ultimately, if your dog is focused and they are having fun, learning goes up and stress goes down. Tip number 6 is that you potentially need to rethink your training environment. So don't train big things in crazy, chaotic places. It's so worthwhile to start in low stress environments and layer complexity over time. This is truly how real world reliability is built. It's not about throwing your dog in at the deep end, it's about building up to it. So if your goal was to swim across the channel, for example, for my UK listeners, but you don't know how to swim, you're not going to go and start to learn how to swim in the English Channel. You're going to go to like a really shallow, calm little learning pool, and you're going to start there and you're going to build up. It's the same for your dog. And finally, number 7, the one no one thinks about is mind your own energy as well, because dogs co-regulate with us. We are so connected. And if you are tense, or you are stressed, or you are frustrated, your dog absolutely feels that. So before you head out on that walk or you stroll into that puppy class, just stop and breathe, loosen your jaw, lower your shoulders, move slowly, and be the calm in their chaos for them. And for when it all goes wrong, because it will many times, it goes wrong for me more times than I'd care to admit. You know, you'll get rushed by an off-lead dog. Your dog will get stung by something or bitten by something. Someone will accidentally tread on them. Something unexpected will happen. Just remember, cortisol hangs around, so give them a little bit of time and grace to bounce back. Cancel that training session after a really tough experience. Skip the park walk. Have a home enrichment day. Let the nervous system recover. Rest is not a setback. I promise you, it's just progress in disguise. All right, my lovelies. I've banged on long enough, I think. I hope that this episode gave you some juicy insights and busted a few myths. I hope now that you've reached the end of it, you feel just a little bit better tooled up to handle or to help your dog handle their moments of stress. And if this episode has been in any way helpful, or you know someone who is struggling with a nervous or reactive dog, feel free to share it with them. And as always, if you loved it, a little review goes a super long way to helping other people find the walk and talk and all the juicy and completely free advice that's in it. I appreciate every single review so much, and I read all of your comments and takeaways. They literally give me life, honestly. Anyway, I'm going to let you crack on with the rest of your day, the rest of your dog walk, and I will see you next week for another episode of The Walk and Talk.